Napoli fans around the world, welcome to Napoli Talk, guys. We have won the Supercoppa, guys. Let me just adjust here the orientation, guys. We have officially won a double, let's call it that way, even though it's technically from a tournament that, it counts as our first of the season, but let's say that in a calendar year, it is a double for Napoli. It's something that hasn't happened in a very, very long time, since the 90s with Maradona. So it's a hugely significant trophy for us. And I think that what I really liked, not just today, but also in the game against Milan, is the desire to go and win it, the desire to show that the champions of Italy are not dead, and to put the horrible Udinese game behind us, guys. So that is something that I think is super, super important. So let me get to let me see if I can, I'm streaming with my phone, which I don't normally do, right? So let's see if I can get the, comments up on the screen. I don't think I can, but regardless, guys, I'm just gonna give out my quick take on the game. So look, Napoli, I think, played maybe the best game in Antonio Conte's tenure here at the club. Right, I think that they really dominated this game. I don't think that's something that Napoli does very, very often. I think that you have seen many times Napoli play good games, but rarely was it the case for 90 minutes, right? Whereas this time against Bologna, against a good Bologna team that did well against Inter just a few days ago, I think we really dominated the entire game. And I think that if the game ended 4 or 5-0 for us, it would have been kind of a normal outcome of the events that took place, right? There was that chance from Elmas at the start, then Spinazzola. So there was a lot of moments where we could have made it 1-0 very, very early on. In the end, Neres got the goal that was maybe the hardest of them all in the first half. And in the second half as well, there were other opportunities, guys, with Højlund, and sometimes it was him taking the shot, sometimes it was him trying to pass the ball, but both times there was moments where we could have extended with Højlund. In the end, it didn't happen. It happened with Neres once again, guys, and yeah, it could have easily been 4-5 goals. And I think that's the first time that something like this happens in a game with Antonio Conte, right? Usually, if we get 2 or 3 goals, it's already a lot. And actually, I don't remember that many games where we do get 3 goals, right? So the fact that I think we've had 5-6 chances that really should have been goals, that says a lot. And we had so much more desire than the other teams in this tournament, than Inter, than Bologna, than Milan, and I think that says a lot about this group of players. And I think that winning helps you to keep winning. So for me, this is great. I know that there's a lot of you that were saying before the Super Cup that this is something that is maybe not so important, right? But I just don't agree, right? It's 2 games, 180 minutes. You don't even have to worry about extra time. That in the grand scheme of things, right, you can find a way to win a trophy, put it in your CV at the end of your career. When you look back, it's in your CV. And it's only 180 minutes, right? The entire tournament. There's literally nothing easier in football, in my opinion. And yet, it's something that does count at the end of the day. People will be counting it. People will be remembering it. Just like we remember that in the 90s, we won with Maradona, against Juve in a 5-1. I mean, these are results that people 30 years later, 35 years later, they still talk about, they still remember, and maybe in 30 years they will talk about Neres' double against Bologna, right? I mean, as a player, you want to be in these games, you want to win these games, because whilst it might seem less important than other trophies, and it is, it's still something that will get remembered much more than a normal Serie A game, guys. So, I think the players showed that they are, there to win these type of things, that they want to make history with this club. And I think that's going to be crucial going into the end of the season, this extra motivational boost, because look, guys, we still have everything to play for, even the Champions League, right? It's something that now seems a little bit out of reach for us, but if we can get into the top 24, then everything resets, and winning trophies helps you win more trophies. And now we won, let's say, a tournament competition as opposed to a league. I wonder if that's going to help us in our Champions League run or in our Coppa Italia run, to win other types of games that are in these kind of knockout conditions. That with Conte, we haven't really experienced this that much, because we got knocked out quite early in the Coppa Italia last year. So now we know that we can also deliver when it matters in these kind of knockout games, high pressure, and I think there was nothing more high pressure than the actual final here. So yeah, let's carry this into the Coppa Italia and into the Champions League, guys. Now, speaking of the game itself, we talked about all those chances that we could have scored, but I just want to give maybe a special mention to some players in particular, and then maybe speak about others that impressed me the least. So why don't we start with the ones that impressed me the least, actually, which is a bit weird to say, no, in a day where you win a trophy and you play so well, to speak about players that you didn't like. So for me, that player this time round has to be Elmas. I think that he didn't have a bad game, but there were a few decisions that I think he could have done differently in the first half. So the first chance that we had, the one that, he had a shot wide or go wide, I think he could have squared it to Højlund, or at least tried to do that. Then a few other bad decisions in terms of, taking a shot instead of finding a teammate. Not his best performance in terms of his decision making, and rightfully Conte decided to sub him off in the second half, and that's something that I think might hurt Elmas a little bit going into the rest of the season. It's that, man, Conte will look at these things, right? He will say, okay, in the big game, when everything was on the line, which is the player that stood up, that stepped up? Okay, Neres, fine. Højlund as well. These guys played well. Juan Jesus even played really well. Rachmani, like the usual suspects, as well in defense, like Rachmani, he played well. Neres, we know the form that he's in. But then he looks and he says, oof, Elmas, did he do what he needed to do? Did he make the right decisions in a game like this? And I think if Conte analyzes the situation, he will think, maybe Elmas, if it's a big game, can I trust him again to make the right decisions? Because today it didn't matter, because we were so much better than Bologna. In the end, we ended up having 10 chances. But imagine that was your only chance of the game, or imagine Bologna scored right after, right? So Conte for sure will be doing these kind of analysis after the game. So Elmas, wow, I think he's not going to start the next one. I have this feeling that I think Lang will take his spot back into the starting 11 ahead of ahead of Elmas just because I don't think the performance was quite there. And this is a guy that, you know, I don't have any kind of liking towards Lang, and I'm here saying that I think that after today's game, Lang has a really good chance of getting back into the starting 11. I think the other players did all really well. Obviously, guys, Neres, I mean, he's in the form of his life at the moment. It's incredible to think that at the start of the year he couldn't find minutes because we were not playing in a formation that suited him, and kind of makes you think how many players out there, you know, so talented, yet they can't find minutes because they're not in a team that plays the right way for them, you know? And that was the case with Neres with us, you know, same group of 23 players, same coach, and yet when we were playing that, you know, 4-person midfield earlier in the season, there was no space for him, and now all of a sudden he's kind of the star man. But I love the way that, you know, for Neres to shine, Højlund has to do such an effort up top in keeping the ball and playing, you know, with an open field in front of him against the defender, winning the one-on-ones, controlling the ball, and then, you know, being able to link up with Neres to put him in the right places, to open up the right spaces for him. So, you know, for Neres to shine, Højlund really needs to do a really good job. And then it also takes a lot of sacrifice from a guy like McTominay, who has to actively get out of the spotlight to cover for an explosive player like Neres to do what he needs to do in attack. And you know, he needs to provide that cover in the midfield, right? Instead of getting into the box, he's there covering, making sure that, you know, we have equilibrium in the team. And it takes a lot of maturity, I think, for someone like McTominay to understand that this is what the team needs right now, and that he needs to step out of the spotlight and to still, you know, be such a team player in the process. And I think that sometimes it's, you know, we take it for granted, but I can imagine that if he had a bigger ego or would have been a more difficult character, he would have made Conte's life a lot harder, you know. It would have been a more difficult decision for Conte to change his position. Maybe he would have imposed, no, this is not where I want to play. And then, you know, the team would have been forced to stick with something that would suit their star man of last year, let's say. But instead, no, like, he showed great flexibility, I think, and, you know, it speaks volumes of him as a player and as the team, and how they want to all now play for the team as opposed to, you know, thinking about their individual stats. So yeah, super happy with how the team has evolved and adapted to the situation. So great play by Rasmus Højlund, by McTominay for adapting, for Neres, obviously, I mean, he's in a form of his life. And then, guys, special shout out to Rachmani and Juan Jesus, because maybe Bologna didn't pose that much of a threat today. But I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they were so good at, you know, preventing a lot of situations, intercepting the ball way up in the midfield before there was even a chance for Bologna to even get close to our box. And, you know, when Buongiorno came on for Juan Jesus, Buongiorno made a bit of a bad decision, I think, defensively. Like, he not defensively, but in the way that he was distributing the ball, he put us under a bit of pressure. And it's interesting that for 80 minutes while Juan Jesus was playing, we were never put in a position of being under pressure where Bologna could press us and could put us in a corner. And then Juan Jesus comes off, Buongiorno comes in, and all of a sudden, you know, something happens that we've made the wrong pass in defense, and now the ball is mishandled. It gets passed to Di Lorenzo on the right-hand side. He's under pressure. Bologna win a throw-in, or maybe it was a corner. And it makes you think, like, you know, during the match, it seems very easy to make the right decision, and players make it seem kind of normal, and you don't even think about it, and the action, the ball moves forward. And then, you know, you replace a guy, you put someone else in who's objectively better. You know, Buongiorno is a better player than Juan Jesus, but maybe he's not in the right, you know, he's not in the game, you know, he's not like fully immersed in the moment. And so he makes just a small, tiny, bad decision. And, you know, all of a sudden the team's under pressure from, you know, out of nowhere. But yeah, I mean, look, that never happened with Juan Jesus. So he did a super good game. I'm not saying that he's better than Buongiorno. I'm just saying that maybe Buongiorno didn't enter into this game with the full concentration of someone like Juan Jesus, who in the end brings a lot of experience, you know, knows how to play in big games, because, you know, he's now at the twilight of his career. He's seen it all. So, you know, he knows a little bit more about what he's doing. And in the end, he's just put another really good performance under his belt, which is something that, you know, 2 years ago would have seemed absolutely crazy to say. And the other thing about this is, I don't think Conte, you know, played Juan Jesus just to save some minutes for Buongiorno and avoid injury, and or because he's buddy with Juan Jesus. I honestly think that Conte really wanted to win this competition, and he put the best 11 that he thought could do the job in this competition, right? Because in the end, he still played Di Lorenzo, Lobotka, McTominay, Hoden. So, you know, he still put in like all the good players, right? And so I think that if he decided to play Juan Jesus, it's because in the training of this week or of these days, he saw that Juan Jesus was a bit more sharp, a bit more focused than maybe Buongiorno was. And I honestly truly believe that. I don't think that him playing was because of some kind of, oh, let's just rest Buongiorno. I honestly think he put the 11 that he thought would give him the most guarantees in this game. And I think the only exception to that, rule is when he brought on Mazzocchi in the second half, right? Because I don't think Mazzocchi, you know, is a guy that brings enough quality to play in a final, regardless of how well he trains. But, you know, this is a guy who is so important in the dressing room for Napoli. I mean, he's the only Napolitan. I mean, I know that there's other guys that are younger, or even Contini, who's, you know, half Ukrainian or half Polish and half Napolitan. I know that there's guys out there that, you know, can say that they can bring the culture and the identity, but Mazzocchi is like full bred through and through. You know, he's the one that came up with the term "Fratema" and all that. So he's such an important character, and I think it's important to have these people on the team, and it's important to also make them feel part of the project, to make them feel happy. And I think, you know, whilst it's maybe too risky to play Mazzocchi in the Champions League, and that's why he's not in the team there, and whilst maybe it's even too risky sometimes in the Serie A, and that's why he doesn't get many minutes, in the end, the Supercoppa, when you're 2-0 up, I think is a great time to put on Mazzocchi, make him feel part of it, make him feel, you know, like he's living the dream. And I think that also helps him still contribute then towards the rest of the team. And who knows, maybe it might even be his last presence with Napoli, right? Because look, in the end, you know, the window, the January transfer window is gonna open anytime now. We are almost at Christmas, right? So 2nd of January, the transfer window opens. There's clubs that are already making deals, like Milan with Fulkrug, and it seems like he might even start in their game on the 2nd of January. So literally the day it opens. So activity is gonna happen, and Mazzocchi, you know, as much as he loves to be in Naples and he's so important for the team, there might just be an opportunity for him to get some minutes. And in the end, now that he's won a Scudetto and now that he's won a Super Cup, you know, I think he's ticked most of the childhood dream boxes. Maybe there's a Coppa Italia still to win, so he might decide to stay. The club might be happy to have him still around, but maybe for him, he's like, okay, I've done what I need to do now it's time to move on. But anyways, regardless, it's good to see a guy like that, you know, get some minutes on the field. Let's see, guys, I don't know if there's kind of anything else that I want to touch upon for this game. But yeah, maybe we can talk a little bit about just kind of general Super Cup topics, which is not necessarily about this game, but it seems like next year the Super Cup will not be played in Riyadh. It will be played somewhere else. There's a lot of cities apparently that have shown interest, maybe even in the United States. And there's a possibility that it goes back to being just a one-time game between the Serie A and Coppa Italia winners, which I think is, you know, it's the way it should be. There's no point in, you know, bringing in other teams. I mean, there is from a TV audience perspective, but I mean, how do you explain to someone that like Milan would win a Super Cup and they lost the Coppa Italia final? Like, it doesn't make any sense, and I think it ruins a little bit the history, of the competition, because you have all these past winners from the 90s, 2000s and all that, and you can see, okay, this guy won the Super Cup because he either won the Scudetto or the Coppa Italia. But then you get to 2020, in the 2020s, and it's like, oh, he won a Super Cup because he was second in the league or second in the Coppa Italia. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. It's not a realistic, it's not the right way to treat the tournament. So first of all, I'm glad if the way the tournament is changes, and I think it's also time to move on from Saudi Arabia. I think there were some legit fans that were there in the stadium that enjoyed their time there, that, you know, I know that they're there because, as I showed you guys, you know, I have a friend who's Saudi. He's living in Saudi, and, you know, his mates, they went to see the game, and, you know, they went and they wanted to support Napoli, and one of them supported Milan last time. So there were people that were interested in watching the football, but in the end, it's not enough people, because you have an entire stadium, which is not even that big. You know, we're not talking about 100,000 seater stadium. This one was maybe 40,000 max, if I'm being generous. I didn't check, but they couldn't fill it. They had to put a huge banner on the seats, saying, you know, Supercoppa Italiana, and the logos of the teams, both on one side of the field and the other, because they just couldn't fill the stadium. There just wasn't demand. And I think that's just something that we have to recognize as a calcio movement, you know, that, look, we're just not going to fill a stadium unless maybe you put Milan Inter as the final, but, you know, you can't guarantee that. And it just looks worse for Italian football to play this kind of game and to not have a full stadium. You know, I think that's more damaging. I think it would have been a better spectacle for people to have seen Napoli-Bologna being played at the Stadio Olimpico in Rome, and you would have had 60,000 people easily turn up, 30,000 from Naples, 30,000 from Bologna. And, you know, at least from you know, the visual perspective, it would have looked better than an empty stadium halfway across the world. Now, did it maybe help us get a few more fans in Saudi? Yes, probably, at least one guy might have, turned into a Napoli fan. I'm sure there's maybe thousands, right? But whilst you do have that, the other side of the tournament is that it's just not enough. If you can turn 50,000 people, then it's probably enough. Then you can fill that stadium. But if you're just converting 1,000 or two, it doesn't even move the needle. It's not like this 1,000 people are going to, bring in that much extra money in Napoli's bank accounts with however many shirts they want to buy. They'll probably just buy a hat anyways, right? But look, we ended up getting the tournament money. We ended up getting the 10 million. So, thank you, Riyadh. Thank you, Saudi. It's always welcome. We do hope that you liked our presence there. But it's clear that they've seen Italian football now for a few years. The spark has not been big enough. We were not able to fill a stadium, and so now we have to move on, because maybe there are other areas around the world, like, it doesn't even have to be Italy, actually. It could be Korea, could be the US, could be Morocco, I don't know, it could be anywhere, right? That maybe there's just a bit more demand for Italian football there, and there's opportunity to give access to this football to fans that have not had the opportunity, right? So maybe that's the solution, right? Do it once somewhere, like 1 year you do it in Korea, 1 year in Australia, 1 year in Morocco, 1 year, so that so that it's always something new and fresh for the local people, instead of going now for the third year maybe in Riyadh, or maybe more, maybe it's 5 years, I don't know. But it's clear that it's not new for them anymore. They've seen the Super Cup, they were like, meh, it's okay, and they were just not that excited this year about it. And there was a few fake fans as well. So not only did we not fill the stadium, but they also had to kind of force people in and to cheer for whatever team. Like, there was so clearly people in the stadium that they didn't know anything about football. Like in the Bologna Inter game of a few days ago, there was a guy celebrating that Inter missed the penalty, but he had an Inter scarf. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Or earlier today, there was a group of they show a group of 50 people all wearing a Bologna hat. Like, guys, you don't even find this in Italy, 50 people wearing a Bologna hat. How the hell are they in Saudi with a Bologna hat? I mean, this is so clearly something that someone outside the stadium said, here you go, here's a hat, and go represent Bologna, go fill up a seat. But these are not Bologna fans, guys. I mean, it's very clear that this is a bit fake, and yeah, I think that there's other places around the world where you would get a lot more hype. I'm thinking Indonesia, Morocco. I think in these places you would find many more Serie A fans. And I'm not saying that Saudis don't like football. I'm just saying they might not appreciate or like Italian football, because then I think, if Barcelona and Real Madrid plays, or even Atletico Madrid, these maybe Spanish teams or a Premier League team, they would fill up the stadium. So I'm not saying that it's a Saudi problem. I'm saying that, it's maybe an Italian problem, that our football is not attractive enough for them. So yeah, that's just a little bit my thoughts on the Super Cup. And yeah, I mean, look, now Italian football is trying to grow, right? There's this thing about Milan Como that was supposed to be played in Australia, then in the end it didn't happen. They're trying to expand. I don't think the right solution is um, to play a Serie A game abroad, because I think it falsifies the championship. I mean, imagine Milan lose the Scudetto because they play against Como in Australia and they lose that game. They could claim that this was not a legitimate game, that in the end it wasn't played in the same conditions as how everybody else played their matches against Como. And so, yeah, I mean, it opens up Pandora's box, right? So either you have everybody play one game abroad, and it has to be, or it should be two games, right? It should be one home game and one away game. Either you have everybody do that, but even then, it's like, what if it's one team does these games abroad and they're against small clubs, but then when it's your turn to do it abroad, it's against a big club, so you avoid playing in a hostile stadium, or you avoid having this match in your own stadium. I mean, it just falsifies the entire Serie A, and it's just not possible. So if they really want to grow the league, they need to find other ways. The Supercup is one of them, but maybe with more rotation instead of, continuously doing Saudi. And another way is maybe with just better kind of social activity, like I don't know, like they can work something out. I'm not gonna give them any kind of free advice, but it's interesting, the situation that Italian football is in now. They're trying everything they can. Look, I hope they succeed, right? I don't want them to fail. It's in our best interest that we find something that works, because the risk is that we keep falling further behind compared to the Premier League, La Liga, and that's gonna damage Napoli as well, right? We need to increase the pie so that we get a bigger piece as well. But yeah, I'm just not sure that they're doing it the right way. Anyways, guys, I think that's it for me. I'm without a computer, like I'm streaming from my phone, so I cannot show you any cool graphics or, things like that, which is a bit of a shame. I hope you guys still appreciate the live though, and the company together, and the fact that we won a trophy. It's not something to go out and celebrate in the streets, but it's still nicer than a regular 3 points, right? At least we have something that remains in the history books. And look, it's almost Christmas, so it means that we can celebrate Christmas with a bit of a lighter spirit and a little bit of extra joy, instead of thinking about the drama that would have happened had we lost against Bologna. Right now we can kind of just enjoy these days, and then we have Cremonese, right? Let's just hope that the players that they enjoy their Christmas, but that they come fired up against Cremonese. Like we know how this team has a tendency to kind of go up and down a lot. So let's hope that 2026 brings a bit more stability, and we really got to turn around our away form, guys, in the league, because we have 2 away games in a row, and we got to start super well. We got to keep the pressure on Inter and Milan. So yeah, guys, that's it. That's everything for me. I hope that you guys enjoy the live. Again, I'm on my phone. I'm not even able to read your comments for all those that are writing, so I'm super sorry. I'll read them when I end the live. But thank you guys for joining. I know that there's many of you there, and as always, Forza Napoli sempre. Ciao.